So you want to take your first steps in the world of Gloomhaven Digital Guildmaster mode. Well, I've clocked up a few hours myself and I've got some tips that I can pass on to you to help you get your guild off on the right foot. And you know, maybe consider liking and subscribing if you enjoy the content. I also stream live over at twitch.tv/MandaryQuest where you can always ask me any Gloomhaven questions related there. Okay, so tip number 1, travel missions, travel missions, travel missions. These are the missions that you need to open up the whole wider map of the Guildmaster mode. Without these, you ain't going to be able to get access to your story missions or your relic missions. They also act as a way for you to get more enhancements. That's how you unlock the Enchantress and how you get more enhancement slots for your cards, which is a huge power spike in the game. When you are first starting out, I would completely avoid doing job missions at the start. It's just a waste of time. You need to open the map up, you need to get some more items, and then perhaps once you start getting some of the more higher level items unlocked in the shop, the rewards for those job missions will start to get better and might be worth doing. Job missions typically only give you extra copies of items that you've already unlocked, and those rewards are random from the ones that you have unlocked. So there isn't much chance that early on in the game you're going to get sufficient rewards really that's worth your time to do. Just go do travel missions instead. Typically the duplicates that you're going to want are going to be small items, they're going to be power potions, they're going to be stamina potions, they're going to be health potions. You're also going to want extra pairs of boots. Keep an eye out for things like that, but generally speaking, you're not really going to need those until you unlock them, so just don't worry about job missions to begin with unless the reward is like super good. Some of the basic starter items and potions and things are actually locked the number that you can get. You can notice that you can get 1 for each character to begin with all of the small potions, and you'll also notice that you can only have 2 copies of Eagle Eye Goggles and 2 copies of the standard start of the game boots. So you may have to trade these around, but keep an eye on that. Unfortunately, you can't get more copies of those items. Although not necessarily an efficient use of your money, you can always transfer your items to another character if you really need them. I would try and avoid doing that if you can, but you really just want to try and get the high level potions and things like that unlocked before you start doing job missions, because those are the ones that you're really going to want duplicates of. Tip number 2, know your achievements. The trainer in Guildmaster mode has a huge amount of achievements for you to unlock. Some of them with just gold as rewards, others with perks and enhancement possibilities. You should definitely be concentrating on these and always have some in your mind whenever you're doing a scenario to work towards. If you are playing co-op, make sure that you all know what you need to do to unlock your personal achievements for your perks, because these will really improve the game for you, will make the attack modifier deck much better, and will just give you generally a much easier time in scenarios. Because these will really make it a lot easier for you, because you're going to be reducing the RNG, you're going to be improving your attack modifier deck in the game, which is just going to mean that when you do an attack, you're probably more likely to actually do the damage that you think you're going to do, which is always going to improve things and make things just a lot easier for you. This system is actually kind of great because you actually have some incentives to bring the not so good cards from Gloomhaven as well. So you actually have a reason to use some of these niche corner case cards that maybe typically if you play the board game, you would never have a reason to bring them in at all, and they're just strictly worse than perhaps some of your other cards. I really like it too because it opens up a lot of possibilities for different play styles and different options with the characters, and perhaps even different items that you would maybe not even take a second look at the first time. So this is a really interesting way to just basically encourage people to experience Gloomhaven, try everything that the game has to offer, rather than maybe just going straight for the best optimal meta gameplay decisions. I did make a separate video on the enhancement achievements that you need to do in order to be able to enhance the different effects onto your cards. You can check that video at the link above, just there. Check it out because it will show you a nice easy way, and you can have that kind of in your mind as to maybe what your party setup will be. Generally speaking, the Mind Thief is the best character at doing these. She actually has access to a lot of early game effects from her level 1 cards, so she can be a really great addition to your party if you want to do all of these achievements quick. The Strengthen enhancement is generally considered to be pretty busted in Gloomhaven. You can add that to any heal action, and if you put it on the bottom heal action, you can always ensure that maybe you are strengthened, so have advantage on that turn and into following turns. It's a pretty crazy effect to have. Also, there's some insanely good ones you can upgrade early on the Mind Thief and on the Spellweaver, so try and get strengthen done as soon as you can. It is more tricky to do. I will also say that if you can get the music note character unlocked early, you will find all of the achievements a lot easier as well. So perhaps focus on getting the music note done if you really want to make this a priority for yourself. Tip number 4, get that gold. I would really recommend getting gold in Guildmaster as a priority, especially towards the end of a scenario, perhaps when you find yourself with a decision. Do you want experience points or do you want gold? I would really recommend in this mode going for the gold, because if you can enhance your cards earlier, or you can buy that item a little bit sooner, that item's going to stick with you all the way up to level 9. That's not going to lose any value. That item is going to be useful for you throughout your entire journey. However, that extra couple of experience points, yes, it might get you closer to a level up, but it's not actually going to improve you particularly on the next scenario. So keep that in mind. Gold is always going to be great, and I really advise people building up a bit of a bank balance so that when you get to enhancements, you can actually just start going crazy with enhancements, especially strengthen. That's quite a costly one, so make sure that you are ready with some gold in the bank to be able to do that. Also, because gold is shared, you can actually ensure that some of the more important characters get some of their big important items that really help them out early. We're talking about Eagle Eye Goggles on AoE characters like the Spellweaver. We're talking Boots on the Brute. We're talking Warhammer on the Brute, Warhammer on the Cragheart. Just any kind of items like that that are actually going to be able to immediately enhance your game, just immediately make the game a bit easier for you, are definitely worth grabbing, and you're always going to use them all the way up to level 9 anyway. If you find yourself needing a little bit of extra gold at the beginning of the game, make sure that you sell the Resonant Crystal item. It's a trash item, you don't want it. The small item slot in Gloomhaven is the most competitive slot in the game. There's so many good items that can fill that slot, and you're never going to find that you have an empty slot on any of your characters, or at least one that will warrant having that item. So just sell it, get rid of it, don't worry about it, spend it on something useful. Also, whatever you do, do not donate to the temple in Guildmaster mode. Currently, it doesn't do anything. Now, this may change. I know that in the board game, you have the prosperity system, and that will be coming in the campaign for digital at some point. And we may see something similar. We may see something slightly different here in Guildmaster mode. But currently, this doesn't do anything. So that 10 gold is much better placed on actually items for your team or for enhancements. Also, it doesn't even actually work towards the bless enhancement with the trainer either. So don't fall into that trap like I did and actually think that you might make some sort of progress towards the bless enhancement by doing this. Tip number 4 is to set your difficulty correctly. Gloomhaven can be a really hard game to get your head around, and you can often find yourself in a scenario where just the flip of a card will determine whether you win or lose a complete scenario you've been playing potentially for hours, especially if you're in the board game, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you come from the board game. You need to ensure that your difficulty is challenging, but you're not losing every single scenario that you're playing. Gloomhaven is a game that is best enjoyed on higher difficulty levels, in my opinion. That's when the puzzle really starts to come out, and you have to start thinking many turns in advance, start strategizing how you're going to combo different things together, combo different characters together, use the elements in efficient ways, use your cards efficiently, use your items efficiently. That's where the game really kind of finds added depth. And on easier difficulty levels, you can kind of get away with playing the game in a very kind of casual way, which is still fun and people will enjoy. However, I do think you should try and find a difficulty level where it is still challenging for you and you're really having to think about these sort of smaller details in the game, because that's where a lot of the fun is for a lot of people. Do not be worried about either lowering or increasing your difficulty after the fact. You can do this in your settings. If you did start off on a hard difficulty and now you're finding it too tricky, you can always lower it down to normal, and you may even want to do this just for specific scenarios. If they're blocking your progress, perhaps you might consider just lowering it for that particular scenario. And for some of the spawning missions, I can definitely see that you may want to do that, because there is a heavy amount of RNG in those, and there's also a heavy amount of being able to play to the strategy of that particular scenario. In the top left, you also have your party level. This is also linked to your difficulty. This is equal to your average party level divided by 2 rounded up. So 5 is the maximum you can have with this, which is all of your characters being at level 9. The difficulty levels play off this. So with Insane, you actually play at 2 levels higher than your party level. So essentially you're playing at level 7. This increases the amount of health that the enemies have, the amount of damage that they can do, and potentially the amount of shield and other innate abilities that the enemy may have. If you are playing co-op, make sure that you find a difficulty level that suits everybody in your group. Some players may be new, so they may actually need to play on a lower difficulty level, or vice versa. Maybe you have some very experienced players who would like to play on harder difficulty levels. Judge the group that you're playing with. Try and find people who are maybe of similar skill level to you. That's my advice. Personally, unless I'm playing on very high difficulty levels, I don't find the game particularly challenging or as interesting. So I would need to also find other people who want to play on that difficulty level with me. Gloomhaven itself is actually pretty forgiving as well when you either fail or have to abandon a scenario because you feel like you can't win. You actually get to keep all of your XP, your gold, and your achievement progress. So don't feel bad about just abandoning a mission if you feel like you can't do it, or failing a mission, because at the end of a scenario, perhaps you can run around, get some extra gold, get some XP, and you haven't really halted your progress too much. You're still moving in a positive direction, just perhaps you'll have to retry that scenario at a later time. Tip number 5 is to know the mission. Gloomhaven Digital has many scenario types, very similar to the board game. However, these can actually vary quite a lot in size, length, complexity, difficulty compared to the board game. So if you are coming from the board game, you will notice that the balance here might be slightly different. You may also find that perhaps in scenarios where you would burn a lot of cards in the tabletop, you don't find yourself doing it here, and vice versa. So there is definitely a rebalancing going on slightly with the enemies and with the different levels and things like that that you are doing. So bear that in mind if you're coming from the tabletop. Personally, I love this. I think this means that this has got like another level of difficulty to it and a different kind of complexity and a different problem to the board game, but that is certainly something that people have noticed coming from the board game into digital. This can actually mean quite often that the value of burn cards can be underestimated or overestimated depending on the scenario. Whenever you do get into a scenario, make sure that you check to see how long the dungeon is. Is it going to be 2 rooms? Is it 3 rooms? Is it 4 rooms? What are your objectives? Is it to get to the end of the scenario as fast as you can? Is it to go onto certain pressure plates? Is it to ensure that you destroy certain objectives and things like that? You need to keep these things in mind when you go into the dungeon and probably initially get a feel for, in the very first room, can you burn cards here, or is that going to come back to hurt you? If you are only playing in a 2-room scenario, for example, you could quite comfortably burn all your cards in room 1 as the Spellweaver, and then just reviving Ether, getting them all back, and then entering room 2 and then doing exactly the same again. That's no problem. But if you have 3 rooms or even 4 rooms and you've got that extra movement, you're going to need to time when to use that reviving Ether a lot more effectively. So definitely check the actual overall dungeon size as soon as you get in to ensure that you know sort of what you can get away with and to anticipate how long it's going to be. Don't forget to check and use the trackers in the top right hand corner. I always forget to check these, but these are a really good indication as to how far you are actually into the dungeon and how much longer you're going to need to last. Keep that in mind that it may not be strictly true, but you can definitely get an indication of how many enemies you might have left and what kind of difficulty is. Also, if you saw an enemy on the first screen before you went into the dungeon in the dungeon overview, but you haven't seen them yet in the dungeon, well, that will be because they're in the next room. So once you start to play the game and you start to understand the different enemy types, what they can do, like if they have shield and things like that, you'll know maybe I shouldn't burn that Pierce card in my long rest because I know I've got to face something with a shield in the next room because that enemy we haven't faced yet. Also remember that if you fail and go back to town, you could always change your party up and somebody could maybe bring a character that's going to be more useful. So in spawning missions, for example, the Crowcart is excellent because they can block off areas of the dungeon with their obstacles, allowing you to control the melee enemies that are moving through. But this isn't so good against ranged enemies. So maybe you're going to need some more heals, or you're going to need some more ranged damage built on. So maybe you need to bring the Spellweaver, or perhaps you need to bring the Tinkerer, because now you can no longer just reach using your Scoundrel or your Brute. Having said that, I do think it is best if you try to find a party composition right out of the gate that you're happy with. If you're playing with 4-player, then your party composition is probably going to be pretty balanced anyway, because if everyone takes one of the base characters, you're probably going to have everything covered in some respect. But if you're playing with 2 people or 3 people, then you may find that you need to change these characters out a little bit more. But my advice would be to only spend gold on the core group of mercenaries that you're going to be taking on regularly, because those are the ones that you're going to want to enhance, and those are the ones you're going to want to try and buy items for. My last tip is just to persevere with the game. Gloomhaven can be a really tricky game to master, and that's part of the fun, is trying to work out how to master all these different characters. If it's your first time playing, I can really recommend the tutorial that's in Gloomhaven Digital. I think it's excellent. I think it does just as good a job as the Jaws of the Lion tutorial, which at the moment is being heralded as the best tutorial for Gloomhaven, so definitely check it out. It does leave a few things sort of in secret that doesn't tell you really, and that's mainly because the game will automate a lot of the processes for you. So if you are trying to learn the tabletop version from digital, I think you can definitely do that, but bear in mind that you're still going to need to go and actually read all of those rules back, because there's going to be some rules in there that you're going to have to implement yourself that unfortunately aren't going to be in digital or aren't going to be obvious in digital. Gloomhaven might be the most unique dungeon crawler that is out there, and there's a reason why it's the #1 board game on Board Game Geek. The digital version does a great job of teaching you all of these rules, hiding some of the unnecessary faff that maybe you'd have to deal with in the physical version, and really just is starting to give you a really great polished experience that will even rival any good video game experience, in my opinion, of this sort of type of game. So for anyone who is willing to put some time in to learn the game, you will be rewarded greatly, and you will probably find hours and hours and hours of entertainment in the game. And that wraps up today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, consider hitting that like button. And if you do want to see more content from me, consider subscribing. I do also have lots more Gloomhaven and Frosthaven content in my channel description below. If you are interested in maybe finding other people to play Gloomhaven with, we have a community Discord full of Gloomhaven players and people who are very knowledgeable about the game. So you can find the link to that in the description if you are looking for maybe people to play Gloomhaven Digital with, or you have some specific rules questions you might like to ask. Also, I stream regularly on Twitch at twitch.tv/ManageRequest. I stream there every Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. So you can always catch me live and ask me any questions, or if you need any advice, you can always catch me live there whenever you like. But apart from that, guys, thank you again so much for watching. Happy adventuring. I will catch you in the next video. Bye. Well, it was fun, guys. It was a good scenario, I think. I think we can learn a bit more from this. I think we don't really need to play on this difficulty level, do we, really? What is this? They're only moving one. These guys aren't moving, so at least I can get an attack in before I run away. Oh, yeah. Looks pretty good to me.